In the latest example of how much rhetoric matters in the country, an innocent software engineer was shot and killed at a bar in Kansas City by a man who allegedly yelled, "Go back to your own country," as he fired shots. The man who unfortunately lost his life as a result of this had been in the country for over a decade and was celebrated in the companies that he worked for. He was very talented. An incredible software engineer that not only worked in, the aviation industry, but did a lot to contribute to tech companies here in the United States. Now, while he was at a bar in Kansas City, 51-year-old Adam Purinton apparently came in, fired shots, and killed the man and then wounded two of his friends. According to reports, Kuchibotla died when a man opened fire at this bar, killing him and injuring two others. The man was later identified as this 51-year-old Adam W. Purinton. Now, Purinton reportedly yelled, "Get out of my country," before shooting. He was charged Thursday with first-degree premeditated murder and 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder.
So that's why Trump, in his CPAC speech today, warned about right-wing terrorism and how it was affecting people in the country, and how we got to do something about it. Until we figure it out, we're going to ban right-wingers from coming into the country. Oh no, we're not going to do that because Trump's a bigot and only wants a demagogue against Muslims. And those 7 Muslim countries, 0 deaths in this country from terrorism that emanated from the ones that are banned. Meanwhile, right-wing terrorism kills people in this country all the time. What is Trump doing about it? I guess he's super weak, so he's not doing anything. He hasn't mentioned this. He didn't mention the right-wing terrorism in Quebec when it killed 6 people. Right. You know why he doesn't mention it? Because he's a bigot. He doesn't care about terrorism. He doesn't care about lives lost. He doesn't care about national security. The only thing he cares about is, how do I demagogue against the others? So if you actually cared about people losing their lives, you would have made a statement about this. Why won't you name it? Why won't you name the problem?
Only if the roles were reversed, he would have.
Oh, absolutely.
Only if the roles were reversed.
Can you imagine? By the way, I don't know whether or not this guy is Muslim. He immigrated here from India, so I don't know what his religion is.
Unlikely, by the way, based on the name.
Unlikely, but this guy walks into a bar and sees people that look brown, and that's all that matters. Get out of my country. By the way, I would much rather have people like the victim in this country as opposed to terrible murderers like this guy. And I hope that he spends the rest of his life in prison. But anyway, everyone who knew him, the victim, they're all so heartbroken. They're like, he was one of the best guys, never caused any trouble, was so easy to work with, contributed so much to our companies. Like, his former bosses, put out statements and videos about this. And it's so tragic. He had a wife. If the roles were reversed and some Muslim guy had walked into a bar in Kansas City and opened fire, this would be the top headline on every news outlet, every single one.
And he had shouted Allahu Akbar before he did it. Not only would it be a top headline, every speech at CPAC would have been about it. Everyone. Right. Instead, at CPAC, the right-wing gathering, no one mentioned this at all because they don't care.
It doesn't bolster their agenda. And what's sad here too is he got off on foot, right? Then he made his way to an Applebee's, and while he was at an Applebee's, he told a bartender that he had just shot 2 Middle Eastern men. Mm-hmm. So in his eyes, he specifically went in there with an agenda to shoot 2 Middle Eastern men. And then it was the bartender that was like, "Wow, who's this guy bragging about shooting 2 Middle Eastern men?" And the bartender called the police, and that's how he got caught. So even though he shot and wounded 1 white guy and 2 Indian men, he believed that they were Middle Eastern men. Right. And that's what's scary too, and that's why the rhetoric that Trump touts is so dangerous.
And it's not just Trump, it's anyone who, fearmongers about the others, anyone who uses similar language. Now, you have to keep in mind, not everyone is in the right state of mind in this country, right? This guy who opened fire is obviously unstable and unfit to be out in the public. He's obviously a public threat. But when you start fear-mongering about certain groups of people, unstable individuals like this will carry out acts of violence.
Well, in this case, it's actually more specific because Steve Bannon, the chief advisor to the president, actually had Donald Trump on his Sirius satellite radio show during the campaign, and he asked Trump about Indian and Asian CEOs in the tech world. So this guy worked in tech, there was Indians in tech that Steve Bannon was complaining about. And Trump actually, to his credit, in that one case was like, no, that's okay, as long as they're rich, right? And they're successful and they're coming into the country, that's fine. And Steve Bannon said, no, it's not fine. They're not our culture. So
Yikes.
when the chief advisor to the president tells you that there's something wrong with Indians working in tech, and then one of them gets shot, okay, now look, I know that bigots are by definition ignorant. So this idiot thought he was shooting a Middle Easterner and shot the wrong people. They do it all the time. The guy who thought he was shooting Jews in a community center, also in the middle of the country, didn't shoot any Jews, just shot people that weren't Jewish at all. And it doesn't get any better if you actually shot Jews or Muslims, okay? But just to show you how stupid and ignorant they are. But now, Steve Bannon didn't say, hey, we should shoot the Indian and Asian CEOs, but he said there's something wrong with Indian and Asian CEOs. They're not our culture. Right. Now, in reality, what it is he's bitter because he couldn't become a CEO in those incredibly successful companies. So he had to turn to demagoguery and rise up through playing on people's hatreds. And if you play up on people's hatreds, and then this is the result from some of the ignorant people who follow you, you shouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah, and it's scary too because when it comes from the top, it trickles down, and when you set that precedent, you're giving license to those that are, maybe they're not mentally stable, but regardless, they're coming from a place of hate, they're coming from a place of bigotry, and then they feel valid in how they act out on it. And we're seeing that with trans rights too. And it's terrifying.
Yeah, for the first time ever, at least in my lifetime, you see people becoming very transparent about their hatred and bigotry.
Yes.
Online, you see it all the time. They're not even hiding behind anonymity on social media anymore. They're just coming out and talking about how much they hate the others, right? And it's just interesting because I think the type of rhetoric that we are seeing from leadership in this country does embolden them, does make them feel like they don't have to hide anymore. They can go ahead and share how they feel. And they feel like they're in the right, they're in the majority, but they're not in the majority. And by the way, Steve Bannon shouldn't be, and hopefully will never be, the arbiter of what our culture is, right? His culture is a type of culture that we should reject. The culture of hatred.
Well, based on that quote alone, let alone everything else he's written and supported, his culture is racist culture. That, hey, you should, even though somebody's incredibly successful, you should be against them anyway just based on what their ethnicity is. I hope that you don't think that's American culture. I know that a huge chunk of this country does not believe that. I think a lot of right-wingers don't believe that. And if you're one of the right-wingers who think, oh yeah, yay America, I like America because America's racist, I think you misunderstood the whole point of the country. Let's go take on the corporate media. Come join us, be a member, and change the media. tytnetwork.com/join.